Hey, this is Damon Cart from NLP Gym. This is a bit of a different kind of video than I normally do. My mentor, Steve Andreas, passed away a few days ago. Steve was, in my opinion, the quintessential NLPer. He, I think, knew NLP better than the founders. And the reason why I can say that is it was almost like he lived a life that was destined for NLP. He was mentored by Abraham Maslow, who did the hierarchy of needs, and he's also credited with being the father of the human potential movement, or one of the fathers of the human potential movement. And then Steve went on to study Gestalt therapy, which was how NLP got started. Richard Bandler modeled Fritz Perls, and that's when they brought in John Grinder to do the linguistic part. And they did that all based on videos that Fritz Perls had done. And they had never actually met Fritz Perls, but Steve Andreas had actually learned Gestalt therapy from Fritz Perls. Steve would later go on to, of course, study with Bandler and Grinder and learn NLP, and then he went also to study with Virginia Satir and also spent some time with Milton Erickson. So of the NLPers, he's perhaps the only one who actually studied with all three of the NLP models, which was how Richard Bandler and John Grinder created NLP. Steve went on to create, along with Connie Ray Andreas, his wife, to me, what is the most complete explanations and processes of NLP. Of course, they learned a lot from Bandler and Grinder, but they also created their own models. Steve came into my life serendipitously. I had met Connie Ray Andreas, his wife. I was facilitating a training that she was a part of, and we just really hit it off. And she's an amazing person. We had a great time. She answered so many questions that I threw at her. And then she went back to Colorado, and I thought, oh, I'd love to see her again sometime, and just kind of let that go. And then suddenly, it's about a month after that, I got an email from Steve saying that Connie Ray had said good things about me, and he wanted to know more about me. He was curious, and he wanted to see if he could help out someone who was up and coming. And I just thought that I had hit the NLP lottery. We started talking, we started doing Skype calls, we started emailing back and forth. He couldn't keep up with my questions after a while, and I was in a really interesting place in my life because I had just separated from my wife. I was scared because I was leaving the house moving out of the house where my kids lived, and it was the first time in my life I was going to not live in the same house as my kids. I wasn't going very far, just a few miles. But this scared me, and I really hit a plateau in NLP. And Steve helped me with all of those things. I became intrigued with his work and really started to delve into it deeply, especially his self-concept model. To me, it's the best thing that's come out of NLP, and to me, NLP is the best thing that's come out of self-help and personal development. He encouraged me to teach it, and at the time I thought it was just too big, it was too amazing, it was too magical for me to teach. And I even told him that. I was like, well, I don't know if I can do this. And he said, well, why not? You understand it better than anybody else, and nobody else is teaching it. I'm retired. And then just came to a place eventually that I realized I had to teach this because people needed this. People need this. It's the most transformational model that I've ever come across. He never asked me for anything in return. Never asked me for anything. He helped me so much. Back in December, I had asked his son, Mark, to come to Santa Cruz and teach one of the modules of my practitioner training. And of course, Mark said yes, and he flew in, and we got to talking, and he said, you probably got my dad's email, but I just want to make sure you know that he's not doing well, and he doesn't think he's even going to be around for much longer. And this hit me pretty deeply. I knew he was up in age, but I didn't know his health was declining that bad. So I sent an email to Steve and checked in with him, and he confirmed that, yeah, he didn't think he had much longer. And this was devastating because, I mean, I know that, people aren't going to be around forever. But we do this stupid thing where we start to think, or we take them for granted, and we think that they will. At the urging of my friend Lulu, she said, I should really go see him. And I didn't want to impose knowing where he was, in his last few months of life. But she helped push me to ask, and I did. And Steve said, sure, yeah, come on out. He said, don't expect much from me because I don't have much energy, but yeah, come on out. And I got to hang out with Mark, who I've become good friends with, and Connie Ray, who I hadn't seen in a while. And they had also just given me permission to turn Transforming Yourself into an online training, so I was very grateful for that. On that Skype call, I could see that Steve was not doing well. But I got to meet him, we got to talk, we got to do the interviews that I've put out on YouTube and Facebook. Most importantly, I got to pay my respects to him in person. And it was really hard, really, really hard to do that. And then when I got the news a few days ago, even though I knew this was coming, I had even emailed him 2 weeks ago, just telling him that I hope me passing on his work, carrying on his work, gave him some satisfaction. And he just thanked me for that, and that was pretty much it. And then I got the news a few days ago, and as much as I was prepared for this, and even though in a lot of ways I don't really feel like I knew him that well or had that much of a personal connection with him, that's kind of the strange thing. I had definitely a connection. I think why he touched me so deeply is because he took the time, and he was so kind and generous with his time to teach me and to make sure that I understood, and he was so patient with me. There are a few things that touch me. There are a few things that touch me so deeply. When someone so selflessly gives to others, and I would have gladly paid him. I would have gladly done anything for him that he had asked me to do, but he never asked me for anything. He just gave and he gave. Even when I told him it was important, reciprocity was very important to me, meaning I wanted to feel like I was giving something back. And he would often say, pay it forward. I'm just so incredibly touched by that. So even though I knew he wasn't going to be with us for much longer, and even though I wouldn't even call us close personal friends, though we did share a lot of things that maybe you wouldn't share with just anybody. I certainly shared a lot of my personal life with him, and he was very good about giving good advice without being judgmental. And his loss is felt in the NLP world for sure, because I would say not only was he the quintessential NLPer, he was one of the most underrated NLPers. His work was is probably more underrated than any other work in NLP because it is so brilliant, and he was not a very good self-promoter. And he didn't care about that too much. It seemed like he cared only enough to make a comfortable living. Beyond that, it was not about the money, it was about the work. We've lost, for sure, one of the best minds in NLP. There'll never be another one like him. So this is my tribute to Steve Andreas. Of course, I will miss him, and I know how much his family will miss him as well. I feel more compelled than ever to continue to explore his work and share it with as many people as I possibly can. There's a lot of people out there who are trying to create new NLP models and new NLP technology, and that's great. What we often overlook, though, is what's already there and what's being what nobody's paying attention to. And Steve's work, I wouldn't say nobody's paying attention to it, but not enough people are paying attention to it, because a lot of what people are trying to do now, it's already been created. He created it already, and we only have to look for what's already there. And Connie Ray, his wife, is still creating. Rest in peace, Steve. I know you didn't believe in God, and neither do I. But I love the idea that maybe someday I'll meet him again. Maybe someday we'll hang out and talk about NLP. I'm really lucky that while he was still alive, that I was able to say my goodbyes and say my appreciations and my thank yous and offer my gratitude. And that's what I'm really filled with right now. Steve used to always say to me, of all the things we can have, we can always have too much of anything except one thing, and that's gratitude. There's no such thing as having too much gratitude, he would tell me. He would also say that gratitude's good for both the giver and the receiver. And that's what I feel like I'm left with most with Steve. There is a sorrow and there's a deep sense of loss. But more than anything, I have gratitude. I have gratitude for his generosity, for everything he gave me, for what he means to me in my life. So, thank you, Steve. You will always have my gratitude.